We actually, thank you, Father. We met Father Rice a couple of years ago and found out at a meeting. He said, I minister to people who work offshore. And in addition to him putting safety first and wearing his vest up here on the stage, he also has taught us a lot about the things that he's doing with his ministry, both on the rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico, but throughout the state of Louisiana. And we thank you for being here today. If you live and work in Louisiana, you are Louisiana Oil and Natural Gas. Someone close by, whether that's a relative or friend in any of the 64 parishes of Louisiana, earns a living or enjoys retirement because of the opportunities offered by the industry. Decade after decade, billions in earnings for workers and taxes are produced by onshore and offshore energy exploration. In fact, each year, oil and natural gas pays nearly $3 billion in taxes and fees to the state. $3 billion in taxes and fees to the state. That totals nearly 30% of all of the taxes the state collects annually. Each day, the oil and gas industry pays $3.5 million to parishes and cities in Louisiana, totaling more than $1.3 billion every year in taxes and fees. But that's just the economic story. Louisiana literally powers a nation that is truly independent. Throughout history, leaders from our home parishes to Baton Rouge to Congress made the decision to explore for energy to meet the priorities of the time, whether that was to win World War II, fulfill the energy needs of a post-war baby boom, or fuel the creation of groundbreaking products and medicines in recent decades, and probably something that everyone has in their pocket or purse, their cell phone. Louisiana answered the call in every case, and as Louisiana's working coast was born, the oil and gas industry, along with maritime, shipbuilding, lumber, and commercial fishing industries, grew in Louisiana because of our resources, our rivers, and ports, and most importantly, because of our people. As Louisiana moved to explore for energy on land and in the Gulf of Mexico, new businesses were created and more families moved to South Louisiana. Communities have expanded in New Orleans, Houma, Lafayette, and Terrebonne. Calcasieu Parish's population alone has increased 5 times between 1920 and 2015. Iberia, Lafourche, and Vermilion tripled in size, and Plaquemines and St. Mary have doubled. As the years progressed, we used the revenues created by energy exploration to construct new roads, schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods on once vacant land. And we did these things and accomplished these things with the encouragement of our leaders and as a result of the decisions we made as a country, state, and parish. Louisiana's impact on national security was immeasurable because of our ability to produce oil and petroleum products. And without it, there could have been dramatically different results. Today, the United States secured energy independence from the Middle East and reinforced our leadership position in the world. We did this because of Louisiana and because of her people. We go through the ups and downs together in Louisiana. During tight times where there's pressure on oil prices, there are negative impacts on both, resulting in the loss of jobs and wages in the private sector and lower revenues and taxes for the state. Through the years, though, neither side has given up on each other. And right now, we are fighting for a business climate in Louisiana that is fair, impartial, and predictable, because that's what companies, regardless of their size, are looking for as they invest. Recently, outside influences, specifically lawyers for hire and paid environmental activists, have led efforts to disparage Louisiana's oil and gas industry. They say Louisiana doesn't need energy exploration, the jobs it creates, and the taxes it pays anymore. They run to a courtroom to single out energy exploration for fault. And what they do is ignore the industry's more than 100-year partnership with the communities of Louisiana. They ignore decisions made by the country, states, and parishes to meet the nation's demand for energy, to encourage the growth of our communities, and to prioritize the use of billions and billions of tax dollars to build roads, bridges, schools, and hospitals, along with more recent projects to protect and reinforce our coast. At the same time, the hundreds of thousands of Louisianians working and living here are told their businesses don't pay enough taxes, saying over and over again that the state needs more and more. An economic strategy of tax and sue does not work. Putting people back to work does. For more than a century, energy companies have created the best jobs in our state. These same companies have also led the way in environmental stewardship. Our state needs leaders who will step up to protect our jobs and our quality of life. We are all Louisiana Oil and Gas, and the time has come for our collective voice to be heard. Thank you for being here, and thank you for making that happen. To get us started with the small number of speakers we have today, I want to introduce a special guest. Senator Brett Allain is a farmer and businessman representing Louisiana's oil patch. As many of you know, he's a graduate of LSU, and he serves as the vice chair of the Senate Finance Committee, and he's going to introduce our first speaker. Senator.
Thank you. I had the pleasure earlier this morning to meet with some very old friends who've been supporters of mine for a long time. I'm going to introduce one of them to you here in a minute, but met with Gary and Dino Schwess, Otto Candies, who's here in the audience, Hank Danos, all from my area, all giants, all I consider giants in the industry. And they reminded us of the importance. They didn't have to remind us, but they reinforced the importance of the oil and gas industry in this state. And while I was sitting there listening to them make their comments, I looked around. You know, all of those companies that I just mentioned, all those guys I just mentioned, had opportunities to move out of this state at any time they wanted. Now, they were born and bred here, and they're loyal to Louisiana. And they could have moved any time they wanted. But all of their corporate headquarters and the majority of their operations, they leave based in Louisiana because they want to. And that says volumes. That really says volumes. So, who spoke to us this morning, Ben Baudouin is the president, CEO of Bollinger Shipyards, and I would like him to tell y'all the same thing that he reiterated to us this morning. Not only did they stay here, but I think as legislators, it's our duty to help them create an environment so that they can stay here for the next 100 years. With that, Ben Bollinger.
Ben Bollinger, I've never been called that before.
I messed that up.
No, it's good. He was saying, too, some old friends. He said Mr. Otto. We had Mr. Otto. We had Gary Schwess. We had Mr. Hank. Brett, I'm not that old, so that's a good thing. I'm not in that crowd yet, but I am low man on the totem pole. That means I get to speak today. That's how it works. But I am president, CEO of Bollinger Shipyard. We are a third-generation business. My grandfather started our company back in 1946, and we've been building boats and fixing stuff in the oil and gas industry ever since. My grandfather's story, we started the good American way. He was working somewhere for someone else, befriended the man that he was working for. He left my grandfather $17,000, which was a lot of money in the early 40s, and he bought an old machine shop that was going up for auction from World War II. Bought some property on the banks of Bayou Lafourche, and here we are 71 years later. We have roughly 2,000 employees. We do a lot of oil and gas work, and we also do work for the government as well. And today, the message that we up here talking about is what everybody's here for, supporting the oil and gas industry. Everyone here understands what that means. What we tend to forget sometimes is we take it for granted. Well, we don't. And that's why we all here today. Oil and gas, you think about, you read about the publications, over 300,000 jobs that we have via oil and gas. I think that's a short number. It's much more than that. As everyone knows in here, they may be direct jobs, but the indirect touches that are made every day is significant. And for us right now, in the current condition that the oil and gas industry is in, we are struggling, and that's what some of the message we talked about today with the House and the Senate side, as well as the governor. We spent an hour with the governor today talking about some challenges that we have. But one thing Louisiana needs to do right now, we can't be kicking our customer, and I say that in the most respectful way of we need to treat the oil and gas companies like our customers. They are partners, they are customers, they are friends, and they're part of this community and a part of our state. And it's not just South Louisiana. You probably could tell by my accent, I'm from Lafourche Parish. Half of you understand what I'm saying. That's a good thing. But all the jobs we create are not in Lafourche. They're not in Terrebonne. They're not in St. Tammany. They're all around all of the parishes of Louisiana. And not just Louisiana, actually around this nation. We have a fortunate situation with Louisiana. We kind of have this southern gem, and the oil and gas company has been here a long time. They understand it. They like it. We have a lot of to me, great infrastructure that already exists and some that needs to be improved on. But as mentioned earlier, we need some predictability. The oil companies need to know that 5 years, 10 years from now, that Louisiana not only has its back, but has its support, and is moving forward to even grow this industry even further. When times are down, you don't look for ways to create new taxes and new burdens or new regulations on someone. You figure out ways of how we can continue to draw more oil and gas jobs here to Louisiana, which affects everything. It affects the schools, it affects the charities, all of it. And it's our jobs as business leaders and business owners to promote that. And with that, I want to thank all of you for being here. On behalf of all of the workers at Bollinger Shipyard, oil and gas is for us, it's a environment and a really a focus for us that we see is going to be troublesome for the next year or 2 years, possibly even further out. But one thing's for sure is we're going to get through this. I mentioned this early on a joke, and I hope it's not too painful for anyone, but I was talking to my mom about Hurricane Katrina, and I said, Mom, you know one good thing about Hurricane Katrina? She said, no, I don't know anything good about Hurricane Katrina. And I said, it happened, and I don't have to hear about Hurricane Betsy. That's all I heard my whole life was Hurricane Betsy. So now you hear about Hurricane Katrina. And I feel like that right now with the way the oil and gas is. I've heard my whole life the 80s. Boy, we made it through the 80s. Well, guess what? Right now we're making it through an environment that's really tough. You're seeing a lot of people that have lost their jobs, lost their benefits, got pay cut. We use the word underemployment today, where you have overqualified people working for less. That's something we are concerned about. There's a lot of things that affects, and we are living through it, and we're managing through it. But managing through cost is one way to manage to a budget. There's two ways to manage to a budget. Y'all know that. Increase revenue or lower cost. And this is a message for the Senate and the House and the governor. We talked about it today. We need to find a very happy balance. I know the state of Louisiana is in a tough time right now as well, and having oil and gas off doesn't help. But now is the most important time to support oil and gas. So thanks for all you do, and thanks for having me here today. Thank you.
I wish I could have the microphone that high. Thank you, Mr. Bordelon, and thank you for everyone who's joined us in that contingent of the largest employers in the state and all Louisiana-based businesses. Brian Hanks is the president and owner of Beta Land Services in Lafayette, and he's the chairman of the Louisiana Oil and Gas Association. Brian was born and raised in Lafayette and graduated from ULL in 1981. He's a certified professional landman with more than 35 years of experience in all phases of land work in more than 38 states and Canada. His Beta Land Services has hundreds of landmen and is currently or has been involved in more than 75 acquisitions, totaling over $25 billion since 2010. And they are very active and great supporters of the industry in the state. I'm eager for you to hear from him. Please welcome Brian Hanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mark. Well, my full-time job, like Mark was saying, is Beta Land Services, and then my other job is Chairman of Louisiana Oil and Gas Association. And as I told many of you last year at the time, I was in my 5th year of a 2-year term, so this year I'm in my 6th year of a 2-year term and committed for a 7th year. You can't give this job away, obviously, right now. But I've added to that resume with regard to LOGA, and now I have the pleasure, and today is one of the days I get to be Don Briggs's personal chauffeur. And Don's in deal, and so I figured if Pope Francis can say a mass in his name at the Vatican, in St. Peter's Cathedral, then I can easily drive him around for a day or two here and there. No one has worked harder in this industry than Don, and we want to recognize Don right now. Well, as was mentioned earlier, I'm Beta Land Services, and its simplest form, what we do is we work for the oil and gas companies. We go to the courthouse and we figure out who owns the surface, who owns the minerals, and then we negotiate oil and gas leases on the behalf of the oil and gas companies so they can drill their wells. Well, there's not a whole lot of that going on in Louisiana. On December 2nd of 2014, I employed 402 people. Within 3 months of that date, I had to lay off 340. Today we're at 75 people, but I'm here to tell you that things are looking up. The tide is turning. Signs of the industry on a national basis are coming back, and we are going to make America great again. However, that hope is only a small spark in North Louisiana, and only because of the Haynesville and to a little lesser degree to the Cotton Valley development in the Terryville field east of Haynesville. It is a pile of worn-out ashes in South Louisiana and our state waters. There's literally no activity. In the last year, in the U.S., our industry has gone from 1,931 rigs in September 2014 to eventually bottoming out at 404 rigs on May of 2016. That's the lowest rig count ever since Baker Hughes was keeping track in 1944. The previous low was 448 in 1999. Today, I am happy to report that as of last week, the national rig count sits at 870 rigs, with Louisiana currently running 42 land rigs statewide. 36 of those are in North Louisiana, two land rigs in South Louisiana, 3 inland rigs, and 1 offshore state waters rig in South Louisiana, for a total of 6 in South Louisiana. Last year, just to give you a comparison at this time, the state of Louisiana had 21 rigs running. And to give you a little scope on a national basis, to further break down the national numbers, Texas has 437 rigs running right now, which is 50.2% of the rigs running in the United States. The Permian Basin alone has 342 rigs, or 39.3%. Oklahoma has another 127, New Mexico 55. So between Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Texas, that represents 71% of the rigs running in the United States. The 42 land rigs in Louisiana, 4.8%. Now, I know that was a lot of numbers for you guys to remember and go through, but if you remember any number today, any number, remember this number, 2. There are 2 land rigs running in South Louisiana when there are 870 rigs running nationally, with 50.2% of the rigs in Texas next door. Kind of makes you wonder why. Well, I'm here to tell you my interpretation of why. See, because I've had those conversations with the CEOs of oil and gas companies, and they tell me their board of directors will not let them come to Louisiana for threat of being sued. Big influx of private equity money. We all have heard about that. Private equity money is running billions and billions of dollars just longing to look for assets. They've heard about it. No one wants to come to Louisiana and be sued. Same as far as numbers, all those numbers for the private equity, there is some private equity, but it's all in North Louisiana. And we're very appreciative of Covey Park and some of the other folks who've invested in North Louisiana, in the Haynesville and in Terryville field. Why more so in North Louisiana and South Louisiana? Not as many legacy lawsuits, hardly any. And they have no parish lawsuits yet. The over 400 legacy lawsuits filed, with the vast majority of them being in South Louisiana, go along with the addition of St. John Parish last week, now adding 6 coastal parishes to parish lawsuits, which is a direct result of the efforts of our governor. Yes, the same governor who stood before our LOGA annual meeting in 2016 in Lake Charles and promised never to do anything to hurt our industry. So much for the ballyhooed election commercial about Code of Honor. Well, I do believe our governor to be someone who truly believes he thinks he is doing the right thing in pursuing the lawsuits. Let's see what he truly wants to accomplish, as he clearly let a group of oil and gas companies know at the governor's mansion shortly after he was elected. The bottom line is he wants to force, through these parish lawsuits, a global settlement in which he estimates our industry is responsible for 30% of the damages along the coast. But we all know the Coastal Restoration Plan is a $100 billion price tag. So that's $30 billion that he wants Shell, Exxon, Chevron, BP, Conoco, and the independents to pay. And I don't know if he expects us to roll over and just write checks. So I thought I'd do a comparison. Well, all one has to do to envision a time frame regarding this global settlement reference is the Exxon Valdez oil spill. That spill occurred on March 24th, 1989. The lawsuit began shortly after that, and much to my surprise, the final payment, the payment was made December 15, 2009 of $507.5 million. The original award was granted for $287 million for damages and $5 billion in punitive damages. So after 20 years and 9 months, Exxon paid $507.5 million. So our governor and his infinite advisors in wisdom say that he expects our industry to pay $30 billion. How long do you think it really will take to collect from our industry? Couple these suits along with the reality that we have oil and gas companies who have worked here, invested billions of dollars, trained and employed thousands and thousands of people in our state and our local communities, not to mention the billions which they have invested already in the coastal restoration, are now being sued by the very state agencies which granted their permits. Not only granted their permits, but approved the work associated with those permits, and now, years later, come back and sue those same companies. When I tell you the depth of damage this governor and his little band of crazed plaintiff attorneys have inflicted on this state and its people is immeasurable. It does not take long to realize why we have not had CEOs willing to testify before our legislators for their fear of retribution from this state. How can anyone sitting on a board of directors or answering to private equity funds not fear the litigious environment of Louisiana? Add another ingredient to the public perception being thrown there to the masses, recognized by those same CEOs and private equity funds. I'm sure you guys remember reading articles in the paper stating how much the revenue the state had missed out on by leaving in place certain incentives associated with horizontal drilling. These being there to make sure Louisiana is competitive with other states. The state numbers that were presented were reported in excess of $1 billion in lost revenue. What has not been presented in the public forum to you and through the media are the numbers had those incentives not been in place. Here are the facts. Of the previously mentioned 870 rigs running across the U.S., 730 or 83.9% are horizontal wells. 63 are directional wells, 77 are vertical wells. Louisiana competes on multiple levels with many states across our nation. Remember I mentioned we worked in 38 states? Louisiana cannot fall victim to what-if calculations unless you present both sides of those. LSU did a study in the early 2000s which showed the effects of losing drilling activity to other states of Louisiana of the legacy lawsuits. It proved to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. Can anyone imagine what that number would look like today? Actually, you can. Today, I presented to you the reality that our industry is on the rise nationally, and I've also presented to you the reality of where we are as a state due to a small contingent of plaintiff lawyers and a governor who has bought into their line of BS as a panacea to solve all of the state problems. As our governor seeks to add revenue in the place of the gross receipts tax, and I've worked in Ohio and been subject to the gross receipts tax, I can tell you all it does is it funnels down additional taxes down on the local and county level, and you end up paying way more tax because of it. We'll continue to run business out of here. We also recommend, if he's open to it, that maybe we shift that focus to maybe have these lawyers that are doing the legacy lawsuits pay 50% tax on anything they get. So let me leave on a positive note. I didn't mean to be negative on you, but it's just reality. Sometimes we need to look at reality. I can tell you this. I opened an office in Midland, Texas about a month ago. And when you go out at night, any of the restaurants, there's probably a third of the license plates Louisiana on it. So no matter what happens, this governor and his posse, they can never take away our work ethic and our ability to lead the world in the oil and gas industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Our next speaker is a native of Lake Charles and graduate of LSU. Roman Hardy is the general manager of Shell Chemical in Geismar. He began his career with Shell in 1988 and today oversees an integrated team of approximately 650 employees and hundreds of contractors working in Geismar. These facilities are centerpieces in a town's local economy, creating opportunities for restaurants, auto dealerships, and similar businesses so they can thrive. Everyone, please welcome Roman Hardy.
Thanks, Mark. I don't know about you, sometimes you hear somebody talk about you, it sounds better than it is in real life, so I appreciate that. So as Mark mentioned, I'm originally from Lake Charles, and things go pretty quick to me. I watch other people in my family, people that my uncles, my neighbors, the ones who worked in the oil and gas industry lived a different life. It didn't take long for me to figure out that's the industry I wanted to work in. So now 27 years later, I can tell you it's one of the best choices I made. Second best, my wife would say she's the number one choice, but the second best choice I ever made. I've only been back in Louisiana 2 years ago, so I've been with Shell since I left LSU, and mainly in Texas. I can't tell you how proud it is to come back home and be a part of growing this oil and gas industry. So when I think about Louisiana oil and gas, it means everything to me, and I appreciate you really for being here. So I'll tell you a little bit about Shell in Louisiana. So Shell has 90,000 employees worldwide, 39 employees in Louisiana. Louisiana is a very important state to us. And we participate from the upstream to deep water all the way down to retail. And you'll see our position in a lot of different places. I particularly want to acknowledge you see a lot of people in red shirts there. So as of yesterday, Shell purchased the remaining 50% of our Motiva joint venture in Norco and Convent. So those are now 100% Shell entities, and really happy to have those folks here. And one of the things that's important to us in Shell is to make sure that we're part of the communities we operate in. And our signature event, we're really happy to be part of the New Orleans Jazz Fest. We've been the proud sponsor since 2006, right after Katrina. So if you haven't gone out there, go and have a great time. It's fantastic, and we're really, really proud of that relationship. So you heard a lot of numbers about the industry, and so I won't repeat all those, but what I will say is that it is no surprise at the amount of impact the oil and gas industry has for Louisiana. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people get their lives from it. The indirect and indirect jobs are immeasurable. I read Lawrence Scott, the Louisiana economist, saying that it's $31 billion in sales revenue from the refining industry alone. And we have positions in a lot of other places. There's no doubt that all of us that live and work in Louisiana are part of the oil and gas industry. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. We appreciate your support. It means all the difference in the world for us to continue to choose to invest here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roman. As many of you know, or you certainly heard a lot of us say, Louisiana's oil and natural gas industry is the #1 private investor in Louisiana's coast. The only entity investing more is the federal government. As an industry, we've created projects and funded research, forged partnerships with the best scientists in the field. The industry is investing in dozens of public and private projects, including miles of oyster reefs created through cooperative programs between the industry, its partners, and local communities. Currently, a partnership between the New Orleans Geological Society and 3 Louisiana universities is using $200 million in industry data to create an underground atlas of South Louisiana, pinpointing faults and researching the root causes of subsidence along the coast. And I know one of the representatives of the New Orleans Geological Society is with us today. In addition, the largest private wetlands owner in the United States, an energy company, is caring for wetlands that extend 120 miles from the Atchafalaya Basin to the Mississippi River. Meanwhile, another energy company last month received the state's Conservationist of the Year award for its work in planting more than 4 million trees across Louisiana's coast. Simply put, a thriving oil and gas industry creates jobs, produces revenue that fills government coffers, and provides the largest stream of consistent funding the state has for working on the coast. And it's done it for decades. I'm pleased to welcome one of our first-time partners in Industry Day, the Coast Builders Coalition. We share a belief that we can address the challenges of our coast and create an even better and bigger working coast. And we do this by working together, not against each other. Please welcome Justin Aaronsworth of the Water Institute of the Gulf to tell us more.
Well, Thank you very much. It's nice to follow somebody like Mark who has a name like I do. It's not, so my last name's Aaronworth, and I married a girl from Opelousas, Louisiana. Her name is Dupre. And she keeps telling me that I'd be a lot better off if I took her name rather than kept my name. So I'm still working on that. But I married into an oil and gas family, and actually some of you may know Cody Dupre from Opelousas. He turned 90 this past weekend, and the guy is just 100% with it. And we had a lot of fun in Lafayette. But it's a real pleasure to be here. I've now been with the Water Institute of the Gulf for 3 months, and I'm just starting to figure out, where the restroom is and the vending machines. And there have been some really exciting developments and some things that I've seen over the last 3 months. But very briefly, if you're not familiar with the Water Institute, the importance of science was mentioned. We got started up in 2011, 2012 as an institute where we really brought some of the best minds in the world to tackle some of our coastal restoration issues. Brought them together in an institute. And it wasn't like the science and the thinking about how to save our coast, and it is a working coast, how to save our working coast. It didn't start 5 years ago. This has been going on in Louisiana at LSU and UNO and Tulane and Nichols, and every university around this state. So we like to say at the Water Institute, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, of people who have been at this for a long time. And what we're really most proud of, the work that we've done, is our partnership with the CPRA. We have been working very closely with CPRA over these last years, doing the science and modeling around the master plan, and that's something that we're very well known for. But one of the things that I'm very excited about, and I think it's so perfect that I don't know if it was an accident or a coincidence that Industry Day and Coastal Day were the same day. That makes a lot of sense to me. My job before coming to the Water Institute, I was the first executive director of the Restore Council. That was the federal agency that was stood up after the BP oil spill. And God help that place. I loved it dearly. We had to get 5 states and 6 federal agencies to agree on things. And you can't get 5 states and 6 federal agencies to agree on what time the coffee break is going to be. So I'm an eternal optimist because we got a lot of work done there via consensus. And I see so much opportunity for us to work together using science. And I'll give one example that I'm particularly excited about, and there are a number of people involved in these discussions, and they're just discussions where I think just getting warmed up. But we've been meeting and talking with Shell and Chevron and Port Fourchon and Bollinger and Schwest about how we might be able to work together. And I'll give one example. This is one of hundreds of examples of how we can use science and nature to protect critical infrastructure. And I don't want to get ahead of things, but if it turned out that the port made the final investment decision to dredge to 50 feet, that would generate at least 34 million cubic yards of dredged material. Now that's gold to us in South Louisiana. So what do we do with it? Well, the port's been doing great work with material like that for a long time. But what we're all talking about is, well, we've developed this modeling, this advanced capability in Louisiana. How can we apply that so that we might be able to create wetlands? We may be able to create some natural features that aren't just good for the environment. They will be. But they also protect the critical infrastructure, protect the port. And if we do this, and I'm very encouraged and optimistic that we will, then we're all standing on the side of the angels together. We are, if we did that project, just for example, we would be creating wetlands, we'd be protecting the port, we'd be contributing to the state's multiple lines of defense strategy. And by the way, we'd be doing it in Louisiana, and that notion of working with nature to protect critical infrastructure, everybody all over the world is thinking about this. We just happen to be at the tip of the spear when it comes to issues like sea level rise and subsidence. And my view coming into the Water Institute is that when you look at how the Water Institute was formed, how we were able to generate all this great science and this great capability, we were formed through contributions by the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. We were formed through the support and the work that we had to do from CPRA. And those two sources, you look at them, that's Louisiana philanthropy and Louisiana taxpayer dollars. So I see this, we've developed this great capability. We have a mission and obligation to say to everybody here and everybody around Louisiana, how do we help? What keeps you up at night? What can we do with nature and with the modeling and the science that we've developed to figure out ways to help to protect critical infrastructure? And there are lots and lots of possibilities. We work very closely with our colleagues in the Netherlands who really, they've been protecting their coast for 800 years, and they've developed all kinds of great science. And we have a deep partnership with those folks. They came over here a month ago and they said to us, we've been doing this for a long time, but what you, the collective us right here, what we're trying to do in the Mississippi River Delta is absolutely unprecedented. We are trying to save our coast, save our way of life, save our economy. So I used to work at the U.S. Department of Commerce, and when we started this work, people used to say, well, what are you doing? Because it was the Commerce Department. We have an economic development mission. They used to say, are you doing economic development or are you doing environmental restoration? And I would always say, yes, exactly. They're not different in the Gulf of Mexico. They're not different in Louisiana. So I approach this really from the notion of both science as well as how do we all come together? What are those opportunities where the circles align and we all have the same self-interest? We all want to see some things get done. So we're very grateful. I'm very grateful for the invitation to be here. I'm very excited about the work that I think we can all do together. And thank you very much for putting Coastal Day and Industry Day together. I think it makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much.
For the record, it wasn't an accident. It was a coincidence, but it's something good that happens when people talk to each other. So hopefully we'll be able to work this out again. Now to our featured speakers. We have two officials who are working every day with us to create the business climate in Louisiana that we need for the industry to operate safely and productively. And our first featured guest is State Senator Norby Chabert. As many of you know, he's a native of Bayou Petit Caillou and a graduate of Nicholls State. He's represented the Houma area in South Louisiana since 2009, and he serves as a longtime advocate for a productive, safe oil and natural gas industry in the state. Senator Chabert is the chair of the Senate Natural Resources Committee, and we're really excited to have him with us today. Please welcome Senator Norby Chabert.
How y'all are? Monique, can you hear me in the back? Just checking. Y'all got a little quiet all day. So I'm going to try to keep my remarks brief. I grew up on the bayou, Terrebonne and Lafourche. Y'all heard Mr. Bordelon talk a little while ago about the old-timers and the new-timers. And one thing about Louisiana that I have to keep reminding people all the time, no disrespect to our good friends, but been called to my clients, the big boys and girls out in the world, the Shells, the Chevrons, BHP, BP. That's the Louisiana economy, you're right. But for the most part, our oil and gas economy is a service economy. We get the oil from the ground, to the rig, to the pipe, to the refinery, and we do it every way imaginable. Whether it's fabricating a rig, or barge in the port of Iberia, Craig, or sending a boat out of Port Fourchon. It's the service industry that drives the Louisiana economy. And Ben's right. We're going through a rough patch. And we need to do everything that we can to make sure that those Louisiana companies that are growing into multinational organizations, servicing all over the world, stay afloat. I'm a child of the 70s, grew up in the 80s. Family was in the boat business. My brother Marty likes to joke that, unfortunately, we went chapter 22. You know what that is? It's when you go 11 twice, all right? First, we hit it in the boat business, and then we tried to do the land work with the pipe test and the tool rental business. My first job, I was 14 years old, pushing a broom in a warehouse because we had to move our company into a fabricated shed in Chauvin, Louisiana because it got so tough. We didn't have hardcore child labor laws back in those days, and I didn't have a W-2, but don't tell nobody that. But it was hard work, and it was good work, and it taught me the value of work. Drew my first dollar in this industry. A mallet pipe test and a tool rental didn't survive, all right, unfortunately. And there's going to be a lot of folks out there that don't make it through this one. But the industry as a whole survives. It endures. And, you know, this is just another time that Louisiana's going to have to do that. Now, you've got strong advocates here in Baton Rouge to get us through this rough patch. Myself, your next speaker, Senator Hewitt, who is an emerging star, not only in the Senate but in the legislature, and it's because of her advocacy for oil and gas and her experience in the industry, working hand in hand with so many folks out there that do all those things that I described earlier. But the most important thing that you can do is what you're doing today. You need to be here. You need to be involved on the local level. You need to be involved on the state level. And you sure as hell need to be involved on the federal level. Because we have to fight those trickle-down regulations from D.C. that those folks up there sometimes I wonder what they thinking when they make them. You know, the old saying, got to pass the bill first before you know what's in it? That's crazy talk to me. We'd never run our business down here that way. You wouldn't run your business that way. But yet D.C. will pass a regulation and it'll cripple an industry. Thank God we've got some folks up there now that's kind of getting us out of the bind that we've been in, but we got a long way to go. And I know what it means to take a day off of work and come up here and tell folks something that in the state of Louisiana you shouldn't have to tell them. That's how important this industry is and how important the work that you do is. We derive revenue from two ways in this state that make up about 60% of our revenue. Sales tax and income tax. And we got some of the highest income tax in the doggone country in some areas. In South Lafourche, in my district, you're paying 10.5%. That's crazy. Right? That's crazy. But we're doing it because the income tax is dropping. Why is the income tax dropping? Because the jobs aren't there. Now, yeah, we're dealing with tough commodity prices, obviously. But all those problems that the chairman of LOGA spoke about earlier with overregulation, overtaxation, and I don't want to get too Scott Angel and rhyme a third one over here, but you have to make sure that the people you send up here get that message. I'm one of the strongest advocates for the maritime commerce industry that we have in Baton Rouge and our port infrastructure. And it's shocking to me every day how much I got to educate my colleagues about the value of an industry that literally provides 1 in 5 jobs for the state of Louisiana. 1 in 5 jobs. One of the largest returns on investment that we can make. But yet, we're getting outspent 3, 4, 5 to 1 in some of our neighboring and competitive states for the same jobs that we do right here at home. We're making it tough on ourselves. So I ask you, next time somebody offers themselves up for public service, really find out if they're going to fight for you, they're going to fight for the industry that you represent, and come up here and they make a difference. And I'm so excited to hear the Water Institute is willing to engage in some really positive things. It needs to be a cooperative endeavor between the rebuilding of our coasts, America's wetlands, all right, and America's working coast, because we do have a working coast. And in order to achieve the goals that we need, we're going to have to work together. So I appreciate your comments, and I thank you for being here. But more importantly, I'll say it again, I appreciate all of you for being here and doing what you do every day. Thank you. If you ever need me, I ain't hard to find. And you just keep doing what you do and make sure that we keep doing what you sent us up here to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chabert. Our second guest speaker, featured speaker, joined the state Senate last year representing Eastern St. Tammany, Orleans, St. Bernard, and Plaquemines parishes. Senator Sharon Hewitt, in her short time at the Capitol, has emerged as a strong voice in how our coastal restoration dollars are spent. She spent years managing deepwater assets for Shell in the Gulf of Mexico and now represents Louisiana with the Southern Legislative Conference's Energy and Environment Council and the Energy Council. We are very excited to welcome Senator Sharon Hewitt.
More female-friendly entrance. I'm glad they thought about us females with the extra steps there. Well, it's great to be here. I feel like I am with my people, and thank you for inviting me and for allowing me to be part of this event. I love the passion of my colleague, Senator Chabert. I mean, nobody can say it better. he is an advocate for the oil and gas business, and he says it in such a Cajun-friendly way. Well, as you can tell, I don't have a Cajun accent, but I can talk oil field trash with the best of them. I can talk about picking up drill pipe and running in the hole, tagging bottom, rotating to the right, circulating bottoms up. I can do all that. Because I started out on a drilling rig. I'm a mechanical engineer by background from LSU. And my first year with Shell was on a drilling rig, multiple drilling rigs actually. And I'll never forget my very first time offshore. I mean, this was like my second day of work. I flew out on a PHI helicopter, had on my red coveralls, like your red shirts, but I had a crease ironed right down the front. And I had on brand new boots and a shiny hat and brand new gloves in my back pocket. I mean, I was really looking good. And I had a bag with so many clothes you could never wear it in one hitch, right? Like, I don't know what I was thinking, but I had clothes for every occasion. And I get off the helicopter and I'm looking around for the welcoming committee. Well, there's nobody there. All the guys on the helicopter scattered because they knew where they were going, and I couldn't even figure out where the office was. So I finally wander around and I find this trailer, and I assume that that must be where the office is, and I'm worried about how am I going to know who's the foreman. Well, it was pretty easy because he was the biggest, baddest, burliest guy in the room, and he had on red coveralls. The arms were cut out of his, and they were kind of half unzipped, and they were real greasy, and his boots were half unlaced, and he was definitely the guy. And I stuck my hand out and I said, I'm Sharon Woodall at the time. I'm the new Shell engineer. And he kind of glared at me, and he stuck his hands in his pocket. He spit in his tobacco cup and he said, there's two problems with the oil business. And I thought, this is great. It's my second day. I'm going to get this great nugget of information. So there's two problems with the oil business. The first is O-rings. Y'all get that. We know O-rings is a huge problem in the oil business. It's the reason the Challenger exploded. And the second problem is women. Well, I'd never been compared to an O-ring before. And so began my career with Shell in the oil and gas industry. And fast forward, 20 years, basically, I did run a big piece of Shell's deep water business. We did everything from drilling and building platforms and doing all the development work, the geology, the exploration. We produced the wells, we abandoned the wells, we did everything. And many of those guys that gave me a hard time in the beginning of my career actually worked for me in the end. And I felt like I had built credibility with them. And I learned a lot about working with people and having people involved and helping you solve problems. And I was also there in the 80s, like many of you, when oil was, do you remember this? $12 a barrel. It was a tough time. And the general manager at Shell, now Shell at that time was the #1 company on the Fortune 500 list. And the general manager at that time did something that has made quite an impression on me. He locked up all the supply closets in One Shell Square in downtown New Orleans. This is the #1 company in the world. He locked up all the supply closets, and the only person that had a key was his secretary. And no kidding, this is a true story. You had to go to the secretary when you needed another pencil or a pad of paper, and you had to show her the stub of your #2 pencil or produce the cardboard off the back of the tablet that you'd used up to be able to get another one. Now, the point of that was not that Shell couldn't afford a #2 pencil. But the point of it was everything is on the table, and we're counting all of our pennies, and everything counts. It all matters. And I've taken that attitude to the state capitol. Every nickel counts. And there are so many opportunities in state government to do things better and more efficiently and more cost effectively. And I'm doing some of that now. I've got 2 budget reform bills that are working its way through the legislature. One of them has to do with measuring our outcomes and benchmarking with other people, other states. Gosh, what a novel idea. You all do that in your businesses all the time. How do you know if you're getting any bang for your buck in the money that you're investing unless you measure your results? The other thing I'm doing is working on undedicating so many of the statutory dedications that we have that ties up so much of the state's funding, so that we can do, again, a better job of prioritizing our money and not giving away so much money off the top. But you know, it's not all just about cutting expenses and raising revenue. It's about creating jobs. The long-term solution to the state's challenges is growing the economy, and we're going to do that by creating jobs in the oil and gas industry, because as goes the industry, so goes the state of Louisiana. You know, Senator Chabert talked about personal income tax collections are down. We were in the state capitol in January for a special session. We were $300 million in the hole, and $200 million of that was as a result of personal income tax collections being below what was expected. Well, it came as a surprise to our economists that because we had lost so many jobs in the oil and gas industry that translated into personal income taxes. And it's true. People don't realize the impact of this industry on the economy and all of the dollars as they roll through the economy. It matters. It's not just the direct revenue that we collect. It is all of the dollars as they roll through the economy. And so it seems to me that the answer is quite simple. And I've had an opportunity to tour around the state and talk with many of you and many executives and owners of companies around the state. And I've asked the question, what is it that is preventing you from investing more of your money in Louisiana? And you've heard that pretty consistent message here from the podium today. It has to do with tort reform. We can't keep suing the oil and gas industries on the coastal lawsuits and the legacy lawsuits. It has to do with needing a stable and predictable tax environment so that you can plan your business and make good decisions. And oh, by the way, the oil and gas industry, we are not the big deep pockets. We're the job creators. We're the engine that keeps the state going. And we have to eliminate the unnecessary regulations that are adding an extra cost of doing business, whether they be on the federal or the state level. I know that you have choices on where to invest. And there are many other states that are competing for your business. You know, Louisiana is the #2 producer of oil and gas in the country. But yet there are many, many other states in the oil and gas business, and we know that you have choices. And I have run Shell's budget. I understand the economics. You look at all the different places where you can invest money, and it comes down to where it makes the most sense for you to do business. And there are lots of options. But I believe that Louisiana is still a great place to invest money, but we have work to do. Louisiana has great infrastructure. We have a trained workforce. And I can tell you that I feel like it is part of my responsibility as an elected member of the Senate to fight for this industry. I want you to know that I want your business, whether you're in the upstream, the midstream, the downstream business, I want you to be in Louisiana, and I'm going to fight for you. If you're in the service industry or the petrochemical industry or the LNG business, I'm going to fight for you. And I want you to work with me and help me to engage my colleagues and help them understand the critical importance of our industry. And I'm positive that we can do this together and we can make Louisiana a better state. Let's do it together. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Senator Hewitt. We have one person who's going to give us some closing remarks, and we can all go about our day. And before then,
good afternoon. My name is Art Price, and I'm with Badger Oil Corporation. We're an independent exploration company headquartered in Lafayette. Badger was founded by Paul Hilliard 57 years ago, and somehow I drew the anchor leg today, so I can only hope that a few of you are still awake to hear these remarks. But I appreciate the opportunity to address you, and the oil and gas industry is so specialized that we tend to have a laser focus on what it is that we do within the industry. So I'm going to ask you to ascend to 10,000 feet and look down at what we collectively do as a group. We're the industry that fuels our cars, our buses, our 18-wheelers. We're the industry that fuels the electricity that powers our homes, our schools, and our hospitals. We're the industry that allows the United States to produce and transport goods all across the country, even across the world. Goods that are crucial to our well-being, such as food and medical services. Energy is the key to our modern society and our standard of living. So if you're part of the oil and gas industry, be proud. Stand proud that you're part of a group that produces such a precious commodity for the United States. Now, looking back, Louisiana was blessed with an abundance of natural resources. Our oil and gas deposits have created jobs for our people and revenues for our state government for well over a century. The energy business has provided employment opportunity for folks in Louisiana from all walks of life. Graduate degrees, postgraduate degrees, people with high school diplomas have all enjoyed lucrative careers in the oil and gas business. That makes us pretty darn unique, I think. But now the energy business is under attack in Louisiana. Led by plaintiffs' attorneys who are in search of their next big payday, hundreds of lawsuits have been filed against companies like Badger. They're seeking large settlements at the expense of our prosperity. And now our own governor has decided to join the feeding frenzy under the guise of protecting our coast. Well, the fact is, the vast majority of all wells in the state of Louisiana are drilled by independents just like us. Investment capital is our lifeblood. Well, the legacy lawsuits and the ever-increasing tax burdens on businesses have made it much more difficult for companies like Badger to raise money to drill wells. That drilling activity and the resulting production is what creates work for the hundreds of service companies across the state that employ tens of thousands of us. I had the opportunity to attend a presentation recently that was intended to attract business to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. One of the charts showed the migration of millennials across the United States. And on the far right, the two tallest bars that jumped off the chart were the state of Texas and Colorado. Millennials are flocking to those states. So I had to put my reading glasses on to find Louisiana way out to the right, and our bar was below the line. So it's very cliche to say that children are our future, our children are our future. But if they graduate from college and leave the state, Louisiana has no future. So it's up to us to turn it around. So I urge you today, please contact your legislators. Ask them to stand strong with the oil and gas industry for our jobs and for the future of our great state. And that concludes our presentation today. We thank everyone for coming out.